So I want to do a check-in on feedback. How is it going? Do you guys do it regularly as a team? Has it become part of your culture, on your squad, on your team? Is it part of your leadership team's culture? I've kind of developed this framework in my mind over the last several years, where when we're trying to do something new, when we're trying to make something part of our culture, there's almost like this three-stage process that happens. And at first, you have a teaching. So it's like, okay, we're just going to use feedback as our example right now, since it's what we're talking about. Have we done good teaching on feedback? After you have a teaching, you could have the greatest teaching in the world, but if it just stops there, we've all heard good teachings about things that we've never done anything with. As a friend of mine once said, like, if more information was all we needed, we'd all have six-pack abs and be millionaires. And so good teachings are a starting point, but they're definitely not sufficient to get us to where we want to go. The second thing is having a practice. So once again, taking feedback, it's like, all right, we had a teaching, maybe it was a training camp, maybe you've taught on it again since training camp, which isn't a bad idea because people don't remember things that you teach once. But then you have a practice. It's like, okay, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, whatever it is, we are going to do this time that we call feedback, where we're all going to sit in a circle. We're going to say, is there feedback? We've got a structure. We've got a way we're going to do it, etc. And that's great. You need practices if that teaching is going to start to become a reality. And then kind of what you're shooting for is you have a culture. And you have a culture when people are just giving and receiving feedback on a regular basis. This is just the thing that we do. And it happens whether the leaders are showing up and saying it needs to happen or not. It's happening even when it's not feedback time, okay? So, teaching, practice, culture. I'd love for you guys to do a quick assessment of your own team and your squads as you talk about this as leadership teams. Like, where are you at? The first thing, have you really had good teaching? Have you followed up on a teaching on feedback in a way that's going to help people? Do they understand the vision behind feedback? The vision being we're helping each other grow and become more like Christ. Also, we are developing true harmony and peace in our teams by talking about the hard things, by not gossiping, but instead having direct conversations with the right person. The second thing, when it comes to teaching, have you addressed their fears? I was once told in a manager training, they said, if you don't understand the fears of your people, you are not fit to lead them. You're not equipped to lead them. And I don't know if I'm going to 100% go with that, but I will say that understanding and addressing people's fears is huge in helping them actually buy into and step into something that is challenging for them, especially like feedback. There is a lot of fear behind feedback. Some fears that people have. One, people are like, oh, I don't want to just be a critical person. And there might be some validity to that. They don't want to look down on others. They don't want other people to feel judged. That's maybe somewhat true, okay? There's usually more underneath that fear of being critical, but that's one that people will at least address or feel in their spirit. It's like, I don't want to be a critical person. Another fear, I don't want to hurt people. Okay, a lot of times we've received feedback or critical words that have been harmful, and we don't want to do that to other people. I think there's also something underneath that people don't voice very often, but partially what they're saying is, I don't like relational tension, and I'm not willing to sacrifice relational comfort for the sake of somebody else's growth or for the sake of giving them good feedback. And that's a tough one, but we need to be willing to push past that and to help people realize, like, yeah, sometimes we do have to sacrifice comfort in relationships if we're actually going to have like truly healthy relationships, if we're going to help other people grow. Some people might be like, I'm not perfect either. And so they're like afraid of giving feedback when they still have areas where they need to grow in their own life. But newsflash, we all know that we are going to have stuff to work on and stuff we need to grow in for the rest of our life. And even in scripture, it's like, all right, you've got like a plank in your own eye. How can you see to remove the plank or like the speck from somebody else's eye? It's like, okay, remove the plank. Yes, so that you can see clearly, so that you can do this. And that's not saying that we have to be perfect before we can bring up areas in other people's lives where they need to grow, where they need to change, where they need to adjust. So help people get past that fear of giving feedback before they are perfect. I think also in that, people have this fear of exposure. It's almost like if I give feedback, that opens the door for other people to give feedback to me. And there's some crap in my life I don't want people speaking into. And so they'll kind of hold back because of that fear. Hopefully we can create environments where people aren't afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of their stuff being seen. Because the reality is their stuff is seen. But it's almost like there's this unspoken rule. If none of us give each other feedback, then we don't actually have to have our stuff exposed either. And obviously, that's not what we're going for. So address some of those fears with people. Cast good vision. Make sure that you've done good teaching and that you've revisited this conversation more than just the once that it was had at training camp. We need to hear things repetitively before we actually like absorb them and maybe decide to change. Okay? So, 1, have you done good teaching? 2, do you have a good practice of feedback? Are you actually regularly doing this as a team? Are you setting aside time for feedback? And also with this, are you regularly modeling feedback with the people on your team? Okay, are you giving feedback during feedback time? Also, are you just giving feedback on the regular? You get to start normalizing this with people. And so you can just be like, hey, can I tell you something I've noticed? Can I give you some feedback? Whether that is positive feedback or it's like constructive feedback where you're seeing areas of growth in their life. So you get to normalize this just by how you give it. If you're super nervous to give feedback, do you think your team is not going to be terrified of it? They will know if you're afraid of it or not. So get comfortable with feedback. A great way to get comfortable with it is giving feedback to each other as a leadership team. So it's great with the group that I'm leading right now. We actually openly talk with our squad about the feedback we give each other as leaders. Now, this is of course like appropriate feedback for the group to hear. So if it's like, hey, I've seen the way you're treating that person or thinking about that person, that's not good, whatever. Like, yeah, we don't need to share about that in front of everybody. But it's like, yeah, we talk about like, oh yeah, this person gave me feedback on this weekend. It was so helpful. And like we talk, 1, we give each other feedback regularly. 2, we talk about the fact that we give each other feedback. We share, we bring others into that process to help them see like, man, feedback really is a gift and it's awesome. And we love it, you know? And we're not willing, or we're not afraid to invite you into that process either. And then our leadership team will even be like, oh man, we take 1 day a week where we get together as a leadership team, and they're like, oh, I can't wait to do feedback at lunch today. And they will say that in front of other people on the squad. And so understanding that there's people who are afraid and uncomfortable with it, we talk about it like we get to go to Disneyland today because we give feedback when we get together, and it's awesome. I will tell you, I've seen this time and time again. If your leadership team is not walking in feedback, it is highly unlikely that your squad will. So when there's things like this that you're trying to introduce into a culture, especially if they're uncomfortable, if there's fear around it, however much you value it, however much you walk in it as leaders, your team and the people you're leading is likely going to be 1 to 2 notches lower than you are. They'll be less committed to it. They'll be less comfortable with it than you are. So if let's say like 10 is the top and you're like a 5, there's a really good chance that your team is going to be a 4 or a 3 or maybe even lower, okay? But if you show up and you're like a 9 on feedback and your team's at like a 7, 7's pretty dang good. I will take 7, okay? I would not prefer to settle for 3. So make sure your leadership team is setting that example, that you are regularly carving out time for feedback, that when it is time for feedback, you show up prepared and you are giving it. If you're recognizing fears, that you are addressing them and speaking into them, and you're showing people the incredible positive potential for feedback. If this is going to be part of your culture, you guys have to normalize it. teach on it, practice it, cast a vision for what a culture of feedback looks like. And then you guys as a leadership team, make sure that you're walking it out and showing people what regular feedback looks like, what regular feedback sounds like, and then what it feels like to receive really good feedback that shows somebody cares enough about you to pay attention to your life, to point out the good stuff, to point out the stuff that needs to improve, and to do it with love and grace. And that is how you guys can actually move people into having a culture of feedback. So have a conversation as a leadership team. Where are you guys at? Where's your leadership team at? Where's your squad as a whole at? And then you take some time, talk with other leaders on your team, have an honest assessment. Where is your team at? And how do you take your team from wherever you are to the next level up? Because I am willing to bet that none of your teams are at a 10 out of 10 on feedback. So there is room for improvement. How do you go from wherever you're at? And don't be ashamed if your team's at like a 1 and you're like, we don't do feedback at all, we're all terrified of it, including me. Okay, talk about it, let's get real. How do we move from a 1 to a 2 to a 3 and just keep on moving up the ladder? If you're doing really well, if you're at a 7, it's like, man, we're doing awesome, but I would love to move from a 7 to an 8, from an 8 to a 9. That's awesome. Have a conversation as a team with your mentors, with your coaches. How do we keep on moving up in this? Because there is always potential for more growth, for more benefit to come from your culture of feedback. And this is one of those things that if you get this thing flowing in a healthy way on your team, it will do so much of the work for you, and your team is going to end up in such a healthier spot. So do the work. It's still early in the race. Get after it, and it will pay dividends later on.